You might be wondering what I'm doing in the woods with my CRX. The answer, absolutely nothing. We got a thumbnail for the last video. Welcome. So nice to have you here. Appreciate you spending your time on this channel. Hope you don't regret it. I gotta turn the car off because I still haven't wired up the fans and it'll overheat if I leave it idling. Forgot to show the other piece of art that Armando did while he's down here. Honestly, one of my favorite pieces. It's like a Speed Racer style neon LZ hit. We had these like old ugly generators and I wanted it to be a bright flash of color. Armando killed it. We've got our circuit around the compound and we've taken a variety of different cars of which we have lap times now. End goal, I would love to do a lap around the compound in every car that I own to figure out where they all stack up. But I don't want a video to just be, watch me lap my compound in my green S15. So I'm gonna take a little bit of a technical aspect. And in today's video, we are gonna use this green S15 street drift car as a tool to compare setup for drifting to setup for racing on the circuit. Now let's say there's a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you know absolutely nothing and 5 being that you know absolutely everything. I feel like in drifting, I'm probably a 4, and then in circuit, I'm probably a little over a 3, but I know enough to make a good comparison. The beauty of it is I know that some of you guys know more than me about specific things, and you always chime in the comment section. I love it. I learn a lot from reading the comments. I'm sure you guys too, and it's always a cool portion of the video. Nonetheless, I think this car, even though it's a drift car, is gonna be faster than a lot of cars that aren't drift cars around here, and rather than doing it and then just being like, oh, I didn't know drift cars were fast, we're gonna take a look at why, and then see if the results are what I think they are. The first thing that we're going to compare is the rear alignment setup. So believe it or not, in most drift cars, we run a very similar setup to what you would in a street car or in a track car. Now, when I refer to toe, what I'm talking about is if you look at the rear wheels, they are not usually parallel on most cars. You have a little bit of toe in or toe out. You're the front of the car. So in drift cars and in most circuit cars, you run a little bit of toe in, specifically about an 1/8 inch. And that helps you give stability and also helps the car not kick out when you have the wheels break loose. Now in competitive formats, some people run all the way up to 1 inch of toe in, but for all intents and purposes, this has the same rear toe that I would put if I had an S15 that was set up for the circuit. But the biggest change is with camber. On a car that's set up for the circuit, you would have some negative camber, so that way when you're cornering, you get a flat contact patch, where when we're drifting, we're trying to get a flat contact patch. So sometimes we'll even run positive camber, so when the rear of the suspension squats and you're burning rubber, you have the most flat contact patch, so the tires last really long, and you have the most grip possible. I feel like a common misconception with drift cars is that we try to make them loose to slide around and be fluid, but with most cars, specifically competition cars, we're usually fighting for grip, and sometimes we'll pull just as much G's drifting as some cars do trying to grip around corners. The front, again, is actually very similar, except instead of running toe in for stability, which is how most street cars are, with track cars or drift cars, we run a very little bit of toe out, about an 1/8 inch to be specific, and that will give you more feedback through the wheel, sharper turn in. And again, there's huge variance, like some angle kits like a lot more toe out, some don't like a ton of toe out. But generally speaking, this car is 1/8 inch toe in the rear, 1/8 inch toe out in the front, exactly how I would set it up for the circuit. Drift cars are also similar to track cars in that we run quite a bit of front camber. I think this car has -4, -5 degrees, which is a little extreme compared to what I would set up on something for the circuit, but it will help you get that good contact patch when you're starting to roll over. But with us, in drifting, you're thinking about what's happening with the wheels when they're out lock. And that's where the biggest difference comes with a drift car, and that's where we're gonna focus a little bit of time on Ackerman. Now for sake of illustration, I'm gonna try to build out a constant radius corner. We have a constant radius corner here, and if you look at it, these are your wheels as a car, okay? No matter what, your inside wheel is gonna have to turn more because your inside wheel, whenever you're going around a corner, is gonna be going around a smaller radius circle than your outside wheel. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand that.
And pretty much every car from the factory, including circuit cars, will have positive Ackerman. Clear as day, you can see on this Evo, your wheel that would be going around the inside corner turns way more than your outside wheel, which prevents one wheel from dragging or skipping as you go around the corner. Drift cars, on the other hand, in addition to usually having some sort of crazy angle, they do run closer to 0 Ackerman. I like to have still somewhat of positive Ackerman in my car because it gives you good steering feedback when you have big angle, but losing some of that positive Ackerman and being closer to zero can result in some push when you're trying to track a drift car around a circuit. But you can be kind of ghetto and work around it by just towing out the car a bunch, which then keeps that outside wheel able to make a bigger radius while the inside wheel can go around a tighter radius. That'll be one of the biggest weaknesses of this thing being competitive around the circuit. Also, drift cars tend to have a different grip setup from front to back. Usually most of the grip is in the rear, and we like the front to slide around a little bit. Because drifting, we're driving almost entirely off the rear of the car, and very little input should be made from the front. If you're making a lot of inputs in the front, you're making a lot of corrections, which isn't smooth and weighs against you in competitions. I like the front to be super loose so it can slide around. You can do backwards entries. When you make mistakes, no one can see them. Diving into like the drivetrain setup, I'd say the two biggest differences that drift cars have is that we don't get a lot of airflow since we're always going sideways. So cooling the engines and cooling any auxiliary coolers like power steering, oil rely way more heavily on fans. We do like 1 or 2 hot laps and then the car sits still on grid. Circuit cars, you have a cool down lap, you're getting a bunch of fresh air so things don't overheat. Where drift cars, it's very hard to keep cool. Again, it can be hard to compare because there's so many different levels, right? We have more of a grassroots style car all the way up to a pro Formula drift car, but generally speaking, at least from my experience, I tend to ask as much as I possibly can out of a turbo setup on a car. I don't really care if IATs start to get hot after 2 laps because the car usually has some time to cool down. Where if you were setting up a car to go around a circuit and do lap after lap after lap, you'd probably run like 50 to 30% less boost than a drift car would because you don't want to have those IATs getting hot after prolonged term of time. Because you don't want to put excessive wear on the turbo, on the engine. You want everything to be running cool and happy. So usually like my drift cars, you'll see a dynograph like this where it's got a bunch of torque, the power kind of rolls over up top. Then circuit cars, you want to keep traction, so they aim for kind of flat line torque and power that just keeps going up, because that makes it much easier to drive, and usually the engine's a little bit happier if you see that versus just slamming it with a bunch of torque in the mid-range. Interior-wise, this car isn't really the best example because it's kind of my weird LZ spec where it's like half full interior, half drift car. But I'd say like generally speaking, the biggest difference is we don't have those door bars that are like up here. Usually we're worried about a car hitting us like when we're sideways and pushing into the door, so we have more elaborate door bars, and almost every drift car has anti-intrusion bars that tie in behind the front wheel. That way if you hit something with the wheels turned, it doesn't push into the cabin, since 99% of the time that we're driving, the wheels are like this. If you're curious for a deeper dive on the whole circuit car versus drift car thing, we actually did a small series on the Drift HQ channel where a buddy of mine, Andrew Engelman, brought over his E36 like proper race car, and we changed just a few things that turned it into an amazing drift car. But some of the stuff that I've mentioned here will come into play later as we start to dive more into the A90 Supra. Since I plan to both drift and grip drive this car, circuit racing people hate it when I call it grip driving because they're like, it's just driving. I think having the angle kit on the front of the Supra is going to be the biggest challenge to overcome, where I know Turk, with his Formula Supra, runs the stock front knuckle suspension components. That way he can have the proper Ackerman. So we'll see if we end up doing switcheroos or if we can figure out an alignment setup that's quick to change in between drift sessions and grip sessions. In terms of brakes, another thing that people always notice is, oh my God, why do you got 2 brakes back there? You can run your handbrake in line with your foot brake. Some people like it that way. Some people prefer dual caliper, but basically one of these is for the handbrake, one of these is for the foot brake. In drifting, there's gonna be someone that's gonna disagree with me. Brakes aren't really that important. Pro cars will literally run stock Z32 300ZX brakes. I think the only thing that's important is just having pads that can hold up to high heat. And like in the case of that car, I preferred pads with more initial aggressive bite because I didn't run a brake booster, and I don't like pads that require a lot of heat. Since drifting, we don't really have any warm-up laps, so you just kind of go out and they gotta work right off rip. But brake-wise, I guess that would be a disadvantage. I'm trying to like accurately illustrate the picture because in my mind, like I'm gonna go out there and I wanna beat every single lap time of this car, which is why I picked the absolute best tires that I have, the Nitto NT01s. This is a tire that I would run on a drift car. However, I don't usually run that much grip on this car. This is more of like a seat time type car. And when you run the higher grip tires, you tend to break more stuff, puts more load on the engine, harder to drive with your friends, and the cost goes up. But NT01s, because I want to beat the Porsche around the compound. Generally speaking, in drifting, I feel like we run a bit softer spring rates than you would in a circuit car, but like the same BCDS series is what I would run in a circuit car as I run with drifting. We just generally have a little bit less sticky tires so we can get away with a little bit softer spring rate. And then sway bar wise, I usually like to run the biggest front sway bar I can. That kind of helps jack more weight on the rear. And then in the rear, I don't like using any sway bars whatsoever. That way, the off throttle, kind of like when you're initiating, kind of gives the car a little bit more side to lean on. When you have a sway bar, it kind of makes it loose in the wrong areas for drifting. Some people like it, not me. might notice the car's a little bit higher than before. Not intentionally, if anything, it's gonna make it perform worse. The thought was that it would be easier to raise the car than it would to be switched tires amongst a bunch of different wheels, because the wheels that I had mounted with the good tires or the wrong offset, and I didn't want to crunch my fenders, so we're a little bit monster trucky. About as expected. There was definitely some braking limitations that you could see in this clip right here. It would have been cheating to put a wider tire in the front. That's why I wanted to keep the typical drift split, even though I have a little bit stickier compound. I am on the fence though of knowing whether it would be faster or slower to drift some corners, just because there's so much understeer and it limits my ability to get on the throttle sooner. So I feel like my corner exit's a little slower than it could be.
Yeah.
That's why I just clutch kicked at the end. But I'm curious to see what the time is.
I was like, he had to do it on one corner.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it, but it's just kind of what happened.
Yeah.
I wanted to take out the Porsche, but at least we got third place. The first official drift car we've had around here comes in third place around the circuit with a 3148. Now, I do want to put this out here that I think it could potentially get into the 29s. I think it would need a 255 up front, which I guess wouldn't be totally uncommon to have on a drift car. Just usually the cars that have 255s up front, you're running like a 285 or bigger in the rear just to maintain that drift split. If you guys want to see it, to see how much faster I can get the S15, I'll call up the boys over at Nitto and see if they can send me out some 255 NTO1s. But that was fun. It was cool. I knew it was going to be quick. Thought it was going to be a little bit quicker, but that just goes to show how fast that R33 that you could win by spending $5 on LCMFG just could be. Did we show them the bag?
I don't think so. I showed it prepped. I didn't show it. Did it get a little further along?
Yeah, we might as well show them. We'll show them. Let's go look.
Okay.
Check engine light came off, but the misfire started getting worse and worse, so I think that this thing just needs plugs. So the fun job of doing plugs in this, you have to take the intercooler off. Love that.
Do you?
No, I hate it.
Okay. I'm just checking.
Mike doesn't know why he drinks energy drinks and then yawns. It doesn't make sense. Comment below if you experience the same phenomenon.
The narration of that.
Yeah, this is the things that happens off camera while I'm trying to work on my car. Mike's complaining about
It's not a
things
complaint.
as usual.
It's
I don't know why.
It's a general question.
$7,000 on energy drinks a year, and America's still the same.
I definitely don't do that.
Some things never change.
You get your cool box out yet?
Listen,
I'm listening.
this is how I get.
And filming.
You ever have a car where you have to take your intercoolers to change your spark plugs?
Thankfully, no. I feel like that would only be a Supra.
It does sound like a Subaru thing. The whole getting it on, getting it back on thing is what I'm nervous about, but the getting it out thing, I'm almost there.
It's alright, when you put it back in, only put half the hardware in, and then you won't have to worry.
It doesn't work when you have a high boost application, Michael.
Hayabusa?
So my theory is that the tune was like never really dyno tuned, and it kind of runs rich, and probably fouled out the plugs just from idling and being mad. So we'll give a shot at changing them and see how that treats us. Don't drop dirt in the intercooler holes. Look what we got in there. She's a dirty.
It's a whole lot of sh**.
Yes, sir. I feel like I can orient this one actually to get it quite easily from the inside of the car. I might actually be able to do that with this as well. There's a nice access window here.
I see.
So
Yeah, that'd be much better.
it smells like engine.
Can you describe that smell for me?
You ever got a 2JZ from an importer?
Okay, you don't need to say anymore.
I don't like working on side-by-sides because I feel like there's so much dirt that inevitably dirt is going to fall in the engine as I'm working on it. There's not really an easy way around it.
Yeah.
Also, in retrospect, I realized it would have been much easier for me to attach this pipe to the intercooler first and then put it on the turbocharger after. Probably the easier move, so I'll likely do that.
What's your predication?
Nothing abnormal. It is possible that the injectors need cleaning on this, which doesn't look very fun, but this thing has been sitting in ethanol for a while, so it probably wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah.
We'll look at the plugs though, and the evenness of the burn will tell us. They appear to be gapped to what I would expect them to be. 18,000th, high boost, ethanol. It's even tighter actually. One has a slightly bigger gap than others, but like nothing really screams at me. I was also hoping to see like maybe some sort of uneven burn, which would tell us that maybe we have like an injector issue, but I don't appear to be seeing that either. Hunt is right. Smells like petrol. Even the side-by-side gets nothing but the best. NGK, baby. Bro, even if you don't.
I appreciate it.
I'm about to throw the trash can in there. You're gonna have to wait. And I'm like, listen, he can't dumpster dive after I throw this in there. Okay, back to.
Back to work.
Shop.
Even before you use the injector cleaner, blowing these things up backwards is a good way to see if you got any debris. Not too bad. Yeah, not bad.
I think that's his favorite task.
Me?
Yeah.
No, I hate it. My least favorite task, actually.
Really?
Especially dealing with O-rings and the worst. Throw them in the bath. So what we have here is kind of our own makeshift injector cleaner, because this ultrasonic bath is kind of small and shitty. But this one has a heater in it, which is kind of cool. But we still use the actuator from this, so it's telling these to open and close while it's using the better ultrasonic bath. My favorite test to use on this that I tend to have the best results for is this is like a cheap China machine. I do the leak test and then it will pressurize the fuel rail so you can see if any of the injectors are leaking even when they're not being commanded to open. Everything looks pretty good. The problem is this like kind of leaks internally, so I'll go to do like some sort of actual spray test, but the data that I get is kind of irrelevant, so I just look at the spray pattern and make sure everything looks okay. So cute. They're so small compared to what we normally use.
They all look good though.
Yeah.
Terrain, okay. Golf cart's still out there, right?
You ready for your bike experience?
Yeah. So left on the brake, right on the gas.
No, you don't need the brakes.
No?
This thing rips, dude.
Yeah?
Okay? I'm not good at wheeling, but I'm getting there. Yeah, that was my best wheelie yet. Did you get that? Did you get that?
Yeah.
Mark the clip. Mark the clip.
Coming in hot! If I ever seen trouble.
Hey, on the right, it has like a perfect jump. I swear I landed like here, bro. Damn, I want to see it. This is fun. The landing doesn't feel good though, because you're like landing flat.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. Speed check, how's that look?
Pretty decent. Pretty
It's got
decent.
full suspension, so I feel like as long as I get my front end over, I'll be alright.
Yeah.
That looks scary. That was pretty scary. Adam!
Mac.
I would have died. We found this little trail. It's pretty cool, apart from some wet spots you gotta look out for. Last time we rode here though, it was dark, so you couldn't really see anything. It's definitely better now. God, this is real rad. That was sick. You know, how sick is that trail?
Yeah, that's good.
It's like a little racetrack.
Yeah.
I love this stuff though.
Oh, yeah.
So good. We're coming to look at your work, Ray. Oh, sweet.
Dang.
Look how good it looks. I still can't get over just having the fender wells done, how much, like, it just brings everything together and cleans it up.
Well, it's cool because in the beginning of this video, I shot this when it was prepped. So.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, in this video?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
So.
Quick turnaround.
Yeah, pretty.
Yeah. Look at that. No, it looks great.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Great work, dude.
I do have really good news. The spark plugs, or maybe the cleaning the fuel injectors, fix the side by side. I took it out for a rip last night. I should have filmed. It was really fun. Me and Josh were mobbing through the woods. We were listening to Initial D Eurobeat, keeping Mike up in the middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. He was trying to play COD, and we were just my brand new belt that works, and my spark plugs and fuel injection system that works.
You're a big side-by-side mechanic now.
Also, if you made it to the end of the video, I probably don't need to explain this to you because you're a real fan and you know my sense of humor. When I said that there were fuel lines on the bucket of the tractor, even Mike thought I was being serious. He came up to me, he goes, Adam, you know those aren't fuel lines, and those are hydraulic lines in the bucket of the tractor. Of course, why would they put fuel lines on the bucket of a tractor? But like I said, if you guys made it to the end of the video, you know my sense of humor. Play along with it because it's funny, because then people think that you don't know, and then it's like we're all in on a joke except for the people that think I'm serious, and then they're like, that's hydraulic line, I know, and we're all laughing at them instead of laughing at me. So yeah, of course, I think. We'll take this thing for a rip. May or may not be acquiring some heavy machinery for this weekend to work some more on the trails. I've read the comments and seen that pretty much every single person hates the trail content. You hate anything to do with tractors. It's the worst thing that you've ever watched, so I'll make sure not to film it. And see you soon.
When you said